Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, my name is Suna Halley, and welcome to the Kidney Talks with the GW Ron and Joy Paul Kidney Center, MOTEP, the Minority Tissue and Transplant Education Program, the Pennsylvania Avenue Baptist Church, and BlackDoctor.org. My name is Suna Halley, and I'm the program manager for the GW Liver and Pancreas Institute for Quality. Today's webinar is very special and it is entitled Kidney Talks, where we are actually answering questions from you, the viewer. This is a special edition, and we are really excited to actually answer questions that may not have been addressed during our previous webinars. Today, we have Dr. Melanson. Dr. Melanson is a professor of surgery at the GW School of Medicine and Health Sciences. He is also the chief of division of transplantation at the GW Medical Faculty Associates and the director of transplantation at George Washington University Hospital. Dr. Melanson has been with specializes in kidney, liver, and pancreas transplantation, and he will be answering those questions today. As well, we have Dr. Callender. Dr. Callender is the professor of surgery at Howard University College of Medicine and also the founder of MOTEP, which is the Minority Tissue and Transplant Education Program. Without further ado, let's jump into our first question. All right, so our first question for today from the viewer. So I don't drive myself crazy. How foamy is the urine that I'm looking for? How often should it happen before I get worried? Dr. Melanson.
Yeah, thanks, Suna. And, this is kind of funny or ironic because I ask myself this same question, since I talk about protein in the urine so often and I know what that means. For me, it's disconcerting when I see foamy urine as well when I make urine. And so let me dispel this person's anxiety by telling them that it's absolutely normal that the first urine you make in the morning, so when you first wake up and the first time you go to the restroom and you make urine, it's perfectly normal for that urine to be a little bit more foamy than normal. Okay, so what the person is asking, which is a very good question, is how foamy and when is it an issue? So the type of people that have a lot of protein in their urine, it's going to be foamy all the time, right? So that's the difference. The difference is, for any normal person, when you get up in the morning, your urine is going to seem there's going to be a lot more bubbles than typical. That's normal. Now, the next time, as you go subsequently throughout the day, then you should not see hardly any bubbles. If the urine you're making throughout the day is as foamy or very foamy, then that means you have proteinuria. Okay. Now, here's the thing, and this is kind of a corollary to the same question. Is it ever normal to have protein in your urine? And the answer is yes, right? In other words, you can have a lot of protein in your urine and it not mean that you have kidney disease. However, you still need to have the workup, right? So what would be a normal reason to have more protein in your urine than what is considered normal? Well, if you eat a very high protein diet, particularly a lot of animal protein. So you could be eating lots and lots of protein, a lot of steaks or, a lot of meat. Then that is going to cause you or can cause you to have a lot more foam in your urine. The other thing that can happen is that you are doing a lot of exercising. So people that run for miles and miles and miles or do very, very strenuous workouts at the gym, that's a normal reason to have increased protein in the urine. And what doctors will do when they're working up protein in the urine is they're going to look for what type of protein is in the urine. In other words, in both of the scenarios I just gave you, if you're eating a lot of protein and if you're working your muscles out so much that you have a lot of protein going out through your urine, there's going to be the proteins are going to be large proteins. In other words, your body's just shedding these large proteins. What is problematic is when small proteins are making it through into the urine. That means that the kidney itself is not filtering that protein. And that's the proteinuria that we are concerned about. But in either scenario, when you have protein in your urine, it needs to be checked out. So after an extensive workup, if you have protein in your urine that's normal, the doctor will tell you so. But usually that will require that that you see a kidney specialist. You're not going to get that sort of a workup unless you're seeing a kidney specialist, i.e., a nephrologist. Okay, so but getting back to the question, a lot of foam throughout the day is the problem. Once in the morning, that's okay.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Longson. We're just checking to make sure we don't have any follow-up questions in Facebook and on our streams before we move forward. Dr. Calendar, would you like to add anything before we move on about the question?
No, I think he answered it perfectly.
Perfect. All right. Seeing no additional questions, we're moving on. This viewer said, I have diabetes. How does sugar impact my kidneys? Dr. Calendar, would you like to take this question?
Yes, it's an interesting question because sugar is, unfortunately, we love it so much, but it's one of the most dangerous substances we eat. And blood sugar, it's interesting because blood sugar is actually what all of our organs thrive upon. And so glucose drives our engine, so to speak. But when you cannot handle the glucose and is not metabolized appropriately, then the sugar becomes toxic. It becomes toxic to the blood vessels. It causes clots. It causes a number of things. But what it does in the kidney is pretty much the same thing. It winds up in blocking the blood vessels that go to the kidney, and therefore causes damage to the kidney. Now, it is not only the kidneys that are damaged by the sugar and the arteriosclerosis that occurs. It's all the blood vessels. But in particular, with diabetes, as you know, it's the number one cause of kidney disease. Uh, it then damages the blood vessels. And as you know, the kidneys are supplied by special blood vessels, and we call them nephrons, and the capillaries. And so when these blood vessels are damaged, then the kidney is not able to function normally. And so therefore, if you are not producing enough insulin to keep the sugar under control, the sugar then becomes changed from the normal glucose that is great for us to something that is toxic to the blood vessels and especially the kidneys. I would remind you that it destroys not only the kidneys, it destroys the blood vessels to the brain, to the heart, and to everything else. But your question was, how does it impact my kidneys? It destroys the blood vessels that go to your kidneys, which results in the fact that they are damaged beyond compare.
Awesome. And I love that, as our viewers are taking or paying attention, get out a notepad and take notes, keep this information for future reference, or maybe share this with someone else in your community, because this is a type of information that can save, friends and family. So let's go on to the next question. Dr. Melanson, please answer this one. My creatinine levels are moderate to high when I get urine tests for my physical. I exercise about 3 to 4 days a week and lift weights. Can that be the cause of high creatinine? This question is coming from Brent.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a common question that we get, in regards to kidney health. And your creatinine levels really should never go to an elevated point in normal health, right? So the way Brent's asking this question, what I am envisioning in my head is that this is a healthy guy who works out a lot and has a lot of muscle mass. Okay. All right. That's great. And again, it's like the speech I give to my sons. They're all athletes. But here's the thing, you know, you can be working out a lot and look very good and have big muscles, and at the same time not be in good health and you could be hurting yourself, right? So again, the body is very adaptive. So if you are doing things the right way, even if you're becoming a huge hulk of a physique for a man, your creatinine should stay normal, right? So if your creatinine is going up, there's something that's not right about what you are doing, right? In other words, is it possible to become very muscular, to work out a lot, and have a normal creatinine? And the answer is yes, right? So if your creatinine is going up, something is not right, right? So, and usually that something is a combination, right? And I've seen this a lot. And the combination is that you are taking in too much protein, protein shakes, um, even just dietary protein. And then what I really do not recommend, you taking these supplements, right? Creatine is one that sometimes people that work out a lot will take. But they're taking these supplements, they're taking all of this extra protein, much more than they need, and then they're working out and they're drinking like sugary drinks instead of water, right? So you combining, increasing all that protein mass. So now remember what I said earlier, your creatinine is going up not only because you're digesting a lot of protein, you're working out your muscles a lot. That's also creatinine. And then you're not taking in enough water, which means you're relatively dehydrated. All of these things will drive up your creatinine, which is, if it's transient, it's okay. But the problem is for these guys that they can do this for a long period of time. And that's when it becomes toxic to the kidneys. So if I was his doctor, I would tell him, hey, look, I know you want to work out, I know you want to be big and muscular, but here's the deal. You've got to do it in a smarter way. Number one, you need to start drinking more water, right? Because the more protein you're taking in, the more working out you're doing, the more water you need. In other words, we already know that you need a lot of water, right? You need to be drinking 10 glasses of water a day that's a normal person. This is not normal. When you're working out like that, you need to be drinking supra normal levels of water. So that person needs to be drinking 15, 20 glasses of water a day. So the water intake needs to go way up to keep them from getting dehydrated. And then although it's popular to eat all that extra protein, you don't need all that extra protein to become muscular or to be physically fit. So what I find with these guys is they're taking in a lot more protein than they need. You can get in enough protein, particularly after you're getting physically fit, in a regular diet. Maybe you can eat a little bit more protein, but you don't need those protein powders and all those supplements. So I would immediately tell them to cut out the supplements, drink a lot more water, can keep working out, and then most importantly is like what I said earlier. You got to make sure that if he has protein in his urine, because I would guess this guy's going to have protein in his urine, that the protein in the urine is the normal protein and not the small proteins, which would connote that his creatinine is going up because he has kidney problems, right? And then that opens up a whole different sort of conversation if he already has kidney problems. Because then you need to start looking at the most, like Dr. Calendar said, the most common reasons why people have kidney disease: diabetes, high blood pressure. Okay, so that's what I don't know all the answers from about this patient from just reading the question, but like I said, I'm thinking in my mind that this is one of these guys that wants to work out a lot and eat a lot of protein, and he's got to drink a lot more water and stop taking supplements.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Monson. And that particular topic, we have a lot of follow-up questions to that. So it looks like there are a lot of individuals who have questions, Dr. Melanson, about natural remedies for kidney function. So we'll get those together and address those questions. But from D Love in particular, how do we know if we're taking too much protein?
Well, just because it's a follow up, I'll just say if you have protein in your urine, then that's too much, right? So that will tell you right there. If on that, it's a very cheap test. It's a little dipstick. If the dipstick says yes, you have protein in your urine, you're taking too much protein, right? But again, they have all these daily recommended um, allowances of certain things. Just a daily recommended amount of sodium and protein. If you follow those general guidelines, that is what you should be doing. Like I said, I think a lot of these diets have us brainwashed into thinking that eating all this extra stuff is good for us, right? But calories are calories, right? If they're protein calories or if they're sugar calories or however, if you don't have a good hold on the amount of calories you're taking in, then it really doesn't matter if it's protein calories or anything else. And when you take in too much protein does stress the kidneys. So I would start with, do you have protein in your urine? Okay, if you don't, then that's good. But then I would again tell you, there's a difference between animal proteins and plant proteins. So there's almost no problem with plant-based proteins. I mean, you can eat all the beans, lentils, whatever you want. That's not the issue. That's not stressful to the kidneys. What we're kind of concentrating on here is animal proteins. That's where the stress comes from. Your body has to expend a lot of energy and a lot of resources to break down animal protein. Plant proteins are easy. So I would say, let's have the discussion. Plant proteins, go to town. Animal proteins, okay, that's where the issue is, and you want to stay within the normal guidelines for animal protein.
Thank you so much, Dr. Melanson. And yes, for all the questions that we did not get to regarding this particular question, we're writing those down. So don't you worry, viewers, okay? Moving on. Next question, Dr. Calendar, if you wouldn't mind letting us know, this person was told that they should get on multiple waiting lists for a kidney transplant. Is this true, and how do they go about doing this?
I think it's a great idea to get on multiple waiting lists for a kidney transplant. Unfortunately, the problem is that it does mean that you've got to spend a little bit more money because you got to travel. But here's the reason. Some transplant centers have a waiting list of 3 to 5 years. Some transplant centers have a waiting list of 5 to 10 years. So you would want to be on the transplant waiting list that is the shortest and has the shortest waiting time. And in order to do that, you need to find out whether your transplant center has a long waiting time, and you also have to be willing to travel to another location when the kidney becomes available. Now, the only problem about this is that the people who have more funds are more likely to get on multiple waiting lists, and they will get transplanted earlier than those who don't have the funds or are not willing to travel. So the answer to the question is, should you? Yes, absolutely. How do you do it? Well, what you do is you get in touch with the transplant center in a location where you know that they have shorter waiting times than your transplant center. And you ask them to allow you to be tested and put on their waiting list. Of course, there is some fees associated with, and you have to repeat some of the tests, but it is worth it because I know some centers may have a transplant waiting time of, let's say, 2 to 3 years, whereas others may have 5 to 10 years and even beyond that. So that it is important and wise to be on as many transplant waiting lists as you can, especially if they have shorter waiting times.
Great. And I also, Dr. Melanson, I wanted you to also add, especially with our center at GW, when someone is on the waiting list, if you can just briefly go through, this was our topic during the last webinar, but what actually entails someone being on a waiting list? What are some of those commitments that they need to look forward to?
Yeah, no, thanks, Suna. And first of all, Dr. Calendar is absolutely right. It is very beneficial to be on more than one list.
Mm-hmm.
A study a few years ago showed that really you maximize your chance of being transplanted, particularly when you get on about 3 lists. But again, Dr. Calendar was right in that it costs more money to be on more lists. Here's the thing, and I think this is what Suna's talking about. What you have to understand is just because you went to a transplant center, and even if you did some tests, doesn't mean you're on their list, right? And this happens sometimes that people will tell us, oh, yeah, I'm already on the list at Hopkins, or I'm already on the list at wherever. And they're really not listed. So what you need to ask, and you should receive a letter. If a transplant center has put you on their list, they have to send you a letter letting you know that you are on their list. And if you haven't received that letter, you need to call them and ask them what's going on, because sometimes people are deluded, thinking that they're on a list somewhere and they're really not on that list. Okay, now what does it mean to get onto a list? Well, it's a process. Usually what you're going to do is you need to go to that center, and then you need to be seen by the doctors and the healthcare professionals at that center. Blood work has to be done, and then additional testing needs to be done. What you want to know, as a patient, what do you want to know before you even go to that center? Well, you want to know, well, what's their criteria? What kinds of things are they going to worry about in listing you in particular, right? So you want to know, do they have a cutoff by weight? Some people do. Most centers will have a certain BMI, right? So they will say, like at my center, it's typically a BMI above 40, right? Which is morbidly obese. If you're morbidly obese, we're going to have an issue with listing you. Now, it doesn't mean that there are not people above the BMI of 40 on our list, but it depends on the patient. But that's the sketch as to what we're looking for. Some people have age cutoff. We don't have an age cutoff at our center, but many centers will say over the age of 70, we will not do your transplant. So you should know that. You should be informed. You should go into the website of the center and know everything about that center before you start, because it is a process and it can be expensive. You got to pay for parking. You got to take off from work. You got to take it costs time. So you want to know, is it worth my investment? Because will they most probably accept me as a patient, right? Or at least you go in with your eyes open and you can have a discussion with the coordinator who is in charge of setting up that visit. So the more information you know going in, the better, right? But to get on a list, it's definitely going to cost something: time, effort, money, tests. And then at the end of all of that, they need to send you a letter. But I totally agree with the sentiment here that it is beneficial to get on more than one list, because you are racing against the clock. And like Dr. Calvin said, it's years and years and years to get a transplant in this fashion. But guess what's a better option? Have your own donor. If you have your own donor, that opens up a lot of doors that may not even be open. In other words, you might be 75 years old, and that transplant center might say, we don't transplant people over 70. But if you have a live donor, that door opens. Why? Because a live donor operation is safer, right? So that's the other thing to always understand. Yes, you want to, deceased donor transplant saves lives, but the best option, and I mean, it's not a close second, it's the very, very best option, is to have a live donor. And that's really what you should be looking for in your family, amongst your friends, church members. I mean, people going to church. Talk to them about donating a kidney, right? So that's what you really should be thinking. If I'm in your situation, I'm thinking about how do I get a live donor?
Great. Thank you so much. So much knowledge and education and sharing the information again. Get out your notepads, write this information down, and share it with someone in your community. We're moving on to the next question. Um, this is for Dr. Melanson. You were noted specifically. Dr. Melanson suggested that home based dialysis is preferable than going to a center. Why is that? What is required from the family in order to do the home dialysis? And this question came from Felicia.
Felicia, what a absolutely great question. And first, let me tell you why I said that. Home dialysis is better simply because you are getting dialysis over a longer period of time, right? So if it's peritoneal dialysis, the typical sort of situation is that the patient will connect to the dialysate while they're sleeping. So over the course of that entire night, they're going through dialysis. So the machine is cleaning their body of toxins all night long. That's 8-9 hours every day, 7 days a week, right? So you're getting a lot more dialysis when you're at home. Even if you're on home hemodialysis, unlike going into a center, when you go into a center for dialysis on hemo, you're going for typically 3 to 4 hours on dialysis inside the center. When you're doing dialysis at home, you are going again about 4 hours. Maybe you could go a little bit longer, 4 or 5 hours, but you're doing it 4 to 5 times a week, right? You're doing 3 times a week in the center, right? And why is that? Well, the center has a lot of people that has to come through. They have all these shifts. They have all these patients that they have to get through there. And that's why you're not on the machine as long. And there's another difference. In the center, because they have to go faster, the blood goes out of your body faster, right? So the blood is moving faster. And that movement can be an issue, right? So in the movement of the blood, in the movement of the fluid, you are at a higher risk of your blood pressure dropping. Why is that an issue? Because it's when blood pressure drops that people have things like heart attacks and strokes, right? And like Dr. Callender said earlier about when he was talking about diabetes, the types of people that are on dialysis have vascular disease. So the blood flow is already compromised because of the vascular disease. And when you put on top of the compromised blood flow, moving the blood and the fluid quickly on the dialysis machine, you're increasing the chance that they're going to have a heart attack or a stroke, right? It's not that the doctors or the dialysis centers are bad. It's just that that process will increase your risk of heart attack or stroke. And it only increases over time because moving the fluid that quickly also contributes to vascular disease. So that's why when you're able to go slower with the home dialysis, hemodialysis, or peritoneal dialysis, that vascular disease is not progressing as quickly. And you are less likely to have a heart attack or stroke, which is the number one reason why people on dialysis die, right? When Dr. Callender and I talk about the benefit of transplant, one of the best benefits is, unlike dialysis, our patients, their vascular disease is not continuing to progress. It kind of baselines where they are. If you give them good kidney function and they have good control over their blood pressure and diabetes. Whereas when you're on dialysis, it's continuing to build. That's why there's such a difference between people that are on dialysis as far as their life expectancy versus people that get transplanted. But like I just said in the last question, answering the last question, the best case scenario, again, if I have kidney disease, if I'm developing kidney disease and I'm getting to the point where I need to be on dialysis, I'm beating the streets trying to find a person that can donate to me, because I know that the earlier I get transplanted, the less of this vascular disease that I'm going to have, the longer my life expectancy. So the typical scenario for someone that's in the best case and having kidney disease is to have what we call a preemptive transplant. That means that your kidney disease has progressed to the point where you need a transplant, but you are not on dialysis yet. You're about to start dialysis, and your brother or sister donates their kidney to you. You get transplanted. You have a normal life expectancy. So that's why we want to avoid, if we can, in center dialysis. It's still life saving, but of the options, in center dialysis, okay, keeps you alive. Better than that, at home dialysis keeps you alive a lot longer. Better than that, transplant. Better than just regular transplant, live donor transplant. The best possible, live donor transplant before you're on dialysis. I hope I made that clear.
Yes, loud and clear to me, and I hope the audience is listening in closely. Thank you, Dr. Ronson. We're going to, yes, go for it, Dr.
I
Calendar.
would add to that part of that question was what is required from the family, and I think it's important to recognize that some people are able to do it by themselves. I just talked to one of my patients who actually dialyzes, inserts the needles himself to his own body, but some people are afraid of needles, and so you may need a brother or sister or a wife or significant other to stick you if you're going to have hemodialysis, or help you if you're going to have peritoneal dialysis. So one of the most important things about the dialysis at home is that cleanliness is next to godliness, as they say. And with peritoneal dialysis as well as hemodialysis, keeping it perfectly clean becomes imperative. And so for that reason, you do need to have family members who can help you with it. And so I would just add that to the wonderful way in which Dr. Melanson answered that question.
Very good. Thank you. And family support is something that comes up dialysis, pre-transplant, and during transplant, which we have spoken about on this channel. So it's very important to have family support. Moving forward, next question from our audience. For African American patients, do you feel that the GFR specific for African Americans is accurate? Why is there a separate reading for African Americans? And this question is from Donna. Dr. Calendar, can you start us off
Yes,
with the answer?
yes. This is a topic. It's very timely that Dana has asked that question, because we've just gone through a situation in which the national body has looked at organ transplant system and found that it was inequitable, especially as it relates to African American patients. And one of the items that they pointed out was the fact that they had this EGFR specific for African Americans, which is inaccurate and inappropriate. And they recommended that it be removed immediately, and it has, so that this is no longer an issue, that there is no EGFR specific for African Americans anymore. And so you've hit on something that has been jeopardizing African American patients inappropriately, and it has no longer eligible, and it has now been removed. So I think you hit on something that is right on target, and that GFR for African Americans is good for GFRs for all Americans. The reason they did that before was that they said that Black men, for example, had more muscle, and therefore they had different readings. But we've recognized that may have been intended to be done for the right reason, but it is not the right thing to do.
Very well said. Thank you, Dr. Calendar. We're going to move on to the next question. This one is for Dr. Melanson. How does drinking, or for anyone who wants to answer, but Dr. Malonson, if you can start us off, how does drinking more water impact the reversing of kidney disease? And this question is coming from Paula.
Yeah, well, water is just the elixir of life. And, what our kidneys do, and the liver as well, to be honest, they are both so important to cleansing us, right? And just like when you're washing something, like washing the dishes or washing your car, the more water you have, the better you get, the better you're gonna clean whatever you're trying to clean. So what our organs do every day is, um, in their function, they're going to put some toxins back into the blood, and the blood is going to go to the kidneys and the liver, and they're going to clean out those toxins, and then it goes out as waste products, either through the urine or through the stool. The more water you drink, the more efficient you make that process, right? And the less water you drink, the more work those organs need to do in order to be as efficient as possible. And like I said, transiently, it's not an issue, but over time, if you're dehydrating yourself, if you're not getting enough water, then over time, it will have deleterious effects. Our bodies require water, large amounts of water. So it now she asked about reversing. Okay, so that means you've heard me talk about this before. There are 5 stages of kidney disease, and the first 3 stages are reversible, are mostly reversible. And in order to do that, in order to reverse the kidney disease, what you need to be able to do is to treat the problem that caused the disease in the first place, right? So, in the first place, the most common reason to have kidney disease is diabetes and high blood pressure. Well, both of those things are impacted by the amount of water you take in, right? One of the things about diabetes is that it's very dehydrating. Sugar in the blood causes you to make a lot more urine than you should otherwise. So that's part of the way the diabetes causes kidney disease. Dr. Calendar already talked about the vascular component of it, but as you're trying to repair the problem, the kidney disease that you have, one of the solutions is going to be taking in more water, because one of the aspects of creating more of a problem for kidney disease is the fact that you are relatively dehydrated. So drinking more water is going to help. But as you do that, you also need to be doing the most important thing, which is addressing what caused your kidney disease, right? And like I said, so if it is high blood pressure, that means your blood pressure needs to be normal. Normal. And remember, what we said is normal is that top number needs to be below 140. So it needs to be 130s, 120s. And that bottom number needs to be below 80. So it needs to be 70s, 60s consistently, right? So if you have kidney disease and your kidney disease is because of high blood pressure, you're going to help yourself by drinking more water, number one. But number two, you might need to take medications, and the other things that go along with health, exercise and diet. But it's very much imperative that the person that asked this question understands drinking water is important, because it's going to be a part of the solution. But the most important thing is whatever has caused their kidney disease needs to be addressed. If it's diabetes, the diabetes needs to be under control, right? So your blood sugar needs to be normal. Remember what we said? Normal blood sugar is never above 120. And the more you do that, get the blood sugar under control and the blood pressure under control, then all of a sudden, with the additional water, your creatinine, because by that point, most of the early kidney disease, once it's diagnosed, your creatinine has started to go up. It'll start to come down. And you need to continue with the regular visits with the doctor so that they can monitor your kidney function.
Thank you so much, Dr. Melanson. Very well said, and a lot of takeaways from there. So drink more water. Drink more water, everyone. Moving on to our next question. Can you discuss why lupus and other autoimmune disorders can lead to kidney failure? This question came from Kiera. Dr. Calendar, can you tell us why?
Yes, lupus and other auto. It's amazing when we talk about autoimmune diseases, and when we say that, we mean that our bodies have antibodies, and these antibodies are supposed to protect us from infection and diseases. Uh, Lupus and other diseases like uh, lupus erythematosus have a situation in which our own antibodies that are supposed to protect us from infection actually do what they're not supposed to do. They actually attack us. And these antibodies then destroy our tissues, the blood vessels and the nephrons. And this then leads to kidney failure. Uh, One of the things that we sometimes do not appreciate is that we're alive today because our antibodies knock out infections and knock out cancers. And when we don't have our when we have our antibodies that not only are not doing that, but actually are working against us, then that causes uh, effects on the heart, the kidneys, and other structures. But that's what happens. The antibodies that normally protect us actually turn around and actually attack the kidneys. They attack the blood vessels of the kidneys, the connective tissues of the kidney, and they then result in kidney failure. And so often the best treatment for this is to use medications like steroids or other special chemicals that actually knock out these antibodies, which we thought were there to protect us, but actually have turned around and actually are destroying our tissues. So that is why for people who have lupus erythematosus and other glomerular diseases that affect glomeruli, damage them, that you get kidney failure. And so in order to do this, our doctors will put us on medication like steroids and other powerful chemicals that will knock out these so-called antibodies, which have lost their way and have decided to attack us rather than protect us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Calendar. Great information there. And Kiera, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to submit and we will definitely address. But thank you so much. Moving on to our next question. Dr. Monson, can you please let us know? This is a question from Tequila. Her grandfather is in dialysis 3 days a week, but can pass urine. Does he still need dialysis 3 days per week, or can he reduce that frequency? Dr. Monson.
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me first say that a patient making urine, even when they're on dialysis, is a very good sign, right? And that's definitely a better situation than not making any urine at all. However, the most important thing is how well his kidneys are functioning, right? You can't tell that all the time by the amount of urine because his kidneys may not be filtering at all. However, usually, and again, they need to discuss this with their kidney doctor. Usually, what you should do is sit down with the kidney doctor because they have this thing they call a KD over V. They can look at how well the patient is filtering because they can take the blood and see how well the dialysis is filtering for him, right? And if he has any residual kidney function, not just making urine, but actually filtering, then his KD over V is going to be in a range where the kidney doctor will say, okay, it looks good enough so that we can decrease him from dialysis 3 days a week to 2 days a week. All right. But I'm going to tell you right off the bat, it's an uphill battle. And I'm going to tell you why. Okay. Now, again, I'm not saying that's what's going on with your grandfather, but I'm going to tell you why it's an uphill battle. If they're reserving a spot for him, they want to utilize that maximum, right? They don't want him to go 2 days a week. They would much rather him go 3 days a week because financially it makes sense because nobody's going 1 day a week. So they're going to have trouble with getting the maximal usage of space by somebody not going only 2 days a week. So it's going to be an uphill battle. So if you're going to have that discussion with the doctor, you need to do your homework. And your grandfather needs to be in the right situation. So what's the right situation? The right situation is, okay, I'm still making urine. So I may not need 3 days a week dialysis because I don't need it for fluid control, but I may need it for filtering. Well, what can you do as a dialysis patient that where you need the machine to filter less? It's diet, right? So your grandfather, if he is eating a proper diet, and a proper diet for a dialysis patient means, not too much potassium, not too much phosphorus, not too much protein, right? But again, that's going to come on his little report card that the dialysis center gives him. So if he's doing those things, in other words, if he's following a good diet and he's making a adequate amount of urine, then it's more likely that he can need less dialysis. That's the homework you should do before you have the conversation with the doctor, because the doctor's just going to say, well, you don't understand. It's not just about urine output, which the doctor's right. But if you've done your homework, then you're going to know, well, all of his labs look good. He's eating this kind of diet and he's making this amount of urine. Why does he need to go 3 days a week? That's the way to have that conversation. And if they do relent and say that he needs only 2 days a week, that's a good sign, because it means that he's got some residual of kidney function, and that's good for prognosis. So yes, I think it's a good question to ask, Tequila. But like I said, do your homework, get all that data, and then have the conversation with the doctor.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Lawson. Um, let's also mention that it's great questions that we're receiving in the chat. I mean, to date or to this time, we have received over 20 plus questions in addition to what we are discussing today, which is awesome. And I think that it goes without saying that we have to do a part two, Dr. Melanson, Dr. Calendar. So the viewers definitely would love to have their questions answered. So are you okay with doing a part two in the future? Are you guys committing to it
Of course.
already?
Of
All
course.
right. So before we
Yeah,
conclude,
I speaking of part two, I know like Chris Rock just did a special. He got 20 million for the first, and he's getting 20 million for the second. So I'm gonna take the Chris Rock contract.
it's already in the mail. Don't you worry. It is already in the mail, Dr. Monson. Thank you so much. So like we mentioned, we're going to do a part two. You've heard it here first, for all the questions that have been asked today. And for anyone who has additional questions, please feel free to send them over to BlackDoctor.org, and they will make sure that we address them in our next webinar. We are going to close for today, so I do want to say thank you so much to Dr. Melanson and Dr. Calendar for addressing all the questions from our viewers. And I also wanted to remind our viewers that March is National Kidney Month. Yesterday, March 9th, was actually World Kidney Day. And World Kidney Day is a global campaign to raise awareness of the importance of our kidneys to overall health, and to also reduce the frequency and impact of kidney disease associated with health problems worldwide. I want to let everyone know that if you are in the metropolitan area for DC, that we provide free kidney screenings around the DC metropolitan area. So if you would like to be scheduled for a free screening, please go to gwkidney.org. Thank you so much for joining us for Kidney Talk today with the GW Ron and Joy Paul Kidney Center, MOTEP, and BlackDoctor.org. We will see you in 2 weeks for a special presentation from Dr. F. Kami, who is currently the Vice Chair for Clinical Affairs and Director of Medical Student Education at the GW Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. He will be presenting on mental health challenges in a post-pandemic world. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great rest of your week.